Hello and welcome to Decoding Confidence. I'm your host, Advita Patel, a confidence and leadership coach and an award-winning communications consultant. And this is where we hold the space to talk honestly about what confidence really looks like at work. Not the loud kind, not the polished, performative kind, but the steady confidence that helps you speak up, make decisions, and lead with compassion, with trust, even when things feel uncomfortable. In each episode, I'll be unpacking the habits, behaviors, and moments that shape confident leadership with practical reflections you can use in everyday real life. So whether you're leading others or you're finding your own voice, you're in the right place. Enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to Decoding Confidence. Let me start this episode with a question. When was the last time you learned something that genuinely changed how you show up at work? And what I mean by this, I don't mean something that you skimmed while you're scrolling and not a course that you half finished because life got a bit busy, but something that actually shifted how you think, how you lead, how you make decisions. Because here's what I've learned about confidence, that it doesn't need to come from one big win, but it is built through quiet moments in between them and how we make choices when no one is watching and how we ask questions when we could just stay quiet. One of the biggest myths about confidence is that once you've made it, you are sorted. That confidence is something that you earn once and then you keep it forever, like a degree certificate or a qualification that you can just hang on the wall. But that's not true. And what I've seen time and time again is that confidence fades really quick when learning stops. And when I did my Decoding Confidence survey, where I surveyed 500 odd people, learning came up time and time again as one of the strongest drivers of sustained confidence. It wasn't talent, it wasn't seniority, and it wasn't even work experience. It was learning. And the data backs this up. Carol Dweck, who's famous for fixed mindset and growth mindset, her research at Stanford on growth mindset shows that people who believe that they can develop abilities through effort are generally more resilient, more adaptable, and even more confident when they are facing challenges. And her studies consistently show that students with a growth mindset generally outperform those with a fixed mindset. Not because they are smarter, but mainly because they embrace challenges instead of avoiding them. And when people have that fixed mindset that I'm either good at this or I'm not good at this belief, they tend to avoid very difficult tasks altogether. And they see challenges generally as threats. And it may expose their limitations rather than give them opportunities to develop new capabilities. Think about that, right? They are generally choosing comfort over growth because they've stopped believing that they can learn. Because learning is the one thing that can keep us adaptable. It keeps us relevant and it stops confidence from becoming brittle and broken. And there's no finish line here. You don't get a certificate that says, yay, congratulations, you're now fully equipped for the rest of your life. That will never happen with learning. Learning is more like you are kind of tending a fire at a campsite. And as soon as you stop feeding it fuel, it will quietly dim down and then die out. And that's what learning is like. And you can feel sometimes a bit lost if you're not planned in this. So before I go any further, I want you to think about something and I want you to do it as well. Like not just think about it, actually, I want you to actually do this. So feel free to pause this part or, go back to this section after you finish listening, but grab a pen and open up your notes app or whatever works for you and sit there with these questions, write them down and sit with these questions. Okay. Are you ready? Right? Question 1. When did you last learn something that genuinely changed how you work or lead? And if you can't remember, or it's been more than a few months, then I would say that's your first clue or sign. Question 2. What do you usually do when you don't know something, either in a meeting or while you're having a conversation? Do you ask? Do you Google it later? Do you use AI? Or do you just hope it doesn't come up again? And do you just nod along like you know what everyone is talking about? That's important that you observe how you react in that situation. And then final question is, how much time do you spend learning? And how much time did you spend learning last month? And think about the small micro moments of learning as well. The blog you read at lunchtime, the podcast you heard on your commute, things like that. There's no judgment from me whatsoever. This is just curiosity and for you to be aware of what's going on, because that's really important. Okay, let's talk about one of the fastest ways confidence can break down. And that is, like I said before, when you have that fixed mindset and you decide that you've already reached your limit and you say things like, I'm not a numbers person, I'm not technical in that, I don't understand that, I'm not strategic enough for that role. That is your fixed mindset talking. And honestly, it's just rubbish, right? We need to really manage that well. Now, a growth mindset, and this is about Carol Dweck's work that I'm talking about here, doesn't pretend that it's easy. It doesn't say that, oh, anyone can do this if they just try really hard, because that is just toxic positivity that can sometimes be dressed up as inspiration. But what growth mindset actually says, it's about skills and it's about confidence and it's about your capability that can be developed with effort, strategy, and the right support. And that really matters for confidence, because with a fixed mindset, mistakes can feel like proof that you're not good enough. And every time you fail or every time you stumble, it confirms what you feared about yourself. But when you lean into your growth mindset, mistakes actually become information, and you use them as data points to help you adjust and improve. And that difference alone can completely change how confident you feel when things get uncomfortable. And trust me, right? If you're leading anything worth doing, things will get uncomfortable. And I learned this the hard way. And I mean, like, really uncomfortably hard. A while back, a few years ago, I was invited to a senior leadership meeting. It was my first time to go to this meeting, and I'd worked really hard to get into it. And I remember just working with my leader to get invited. I walked in and like feeling really confident. I earned my seat at this table. And then when the conversation around that table turned to budgets and forecasts and balance sheets and EBITDA and all that finance stuff, I was just lost, completely and utterly lost. I nodded along. I hoped nobody would ask me any questions, hoping that maybe I'd blag my way through it. Oh my goodness. But inside, that story that I was telling myself was just brutal. It's just like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. How silly am I? Why did I push it? I'm completely out my depth, and they're really going to notice. And I just stayed really quiet in those meetings, and I avoided asking questions because I didn't want to look incompetent. And I thought that if I just keep my head down and nodded in the right places, I could just get through it. But it wasn't helping my personal brand, my influence at all. And I thought to myself, I can't have this story that I'm not a numbers person and finance isn't my thing. So I decided that I had to go and learn, and I had to do something about this. So I went off and I did Finance for Non-Finance Managers program. And it wasn't a really massive, expensive investment, but it was a practical course that broke things down for me. I also went and asked our finance business partner if she'd walk me through the basics over coffee at lunchtimes. And I also said to her, let's do like a skills exchange, because she wanted to understand more about communications. And then a few months later, I was back in that same meeting feeling much more confident about finance and how I could contribute. And that's where people get stuck sometimes. They don't ask for help, and they assume that learning means going back to school and getting another qualification, or sitting in classrooms and doing really long programs with essays and exams and things like that. And look, right, if all that kind of stuff works for you, then that is brilliant. Like, stick with it. If you enjoy that, that's brilliant. But it doesn't mean if you don't enjoy it, you have to do that. Because the most confident leaders I know are the ones who are really strategic in how they learn and they find ways that fit their lives, not someone else's idea of what learning should look like. And to kind of back this up, right, there's some fascinating research from the Center of Creative Leadership that looked at how successful leaders actually develop their skills. And the researchers on that study surveyed nearly 200 executives and discovered something that challenges everything we think about professional development. And I found this fascinating. They found that the most impactful learning came predominantly from challenging on-the-job experiences, followed by developmental relationships like coaching and mentoring and what I did with the finance business partner. With formal training, like I did with finance for non-finance managers, making up a smallest proportion. And this became known as the 70-20-10 model. And though it's important to know that these aren't rigid percentages and it's very dependent on how we choose to learn or how we do learn, it is a reminder that most learning happens through doing and through people and not just through courses. And that actually makes sense, right? Because if you think about how you've learned your experience right now, and if you think about some of your greatest lessons you've learned, I can bet money on it came from an individual, a person, or work shadowing or asking curious questions. It maybe not necessarily came from books or exams. It's how you put that into practice. So let me give you some practical examples. So firstly, you could shadow someone in another department, just like I did with the finance business partner. You can see how they run meetings, how they solve problems, manage their priorities. Then you can take like one or two ideas back to your own work or your own department. That's really powerful. Second, you could sit in on meetings that you wouldn't normally attend, where you could just listen and notice what's going on around you, notice the assumptions that are being made, and also how decisions are being shaped and made. That's, can really help you in your own work. Number 3, you could schedule insight chats, like 20 minutes with a customer, 20 minutes with a stakeholder, a leader, or a colleague whose work impacts yours in unexpected ways. We say that we do a lot around lessons learned, right? So the 4th one is running those kind of quick project lessons learned. Like whether it's your project or someone else's, it doesn't really matter. But it's good for you to know like what's worked, what didn't work, and what would you do differently. You can use your own project examples, like I said, or you can use a case study to do this. Finally, it's worth pairing up with someone who speaks a different business language to you. And I don't mean like French or Spanish or anything like that. I mean someone who understands things like data, maybe finance, technology, communications, accountancy, whatever you're kind of struggling with. Ask them to walk you through the basics. Again, going back to my example with the finance business partner, because that's kind of learning that actually shows up in the moments is what matters the most. And that's what will help you build your confidence and self-esteem in the work that you're doing. And even the most self-driven leaders are really curious, but they don't do it alone. They deliberately surround themselves with people who challenge them, who support them, who expand their thinking. And I call this the learning circle. And I want you to think of your learning circle a bit like a personal board of advisors for your development. Small, intentional, strategic. Your learning circle should include 3 key roles. You've got the questioner. This is someone who pushes your thinking and challenges your assumption. There may be someone, a peer from another function. It might be somebody in your industry with a completely different perspective from you. The kind of person you can say to, I'm planning our next campaign. What am I missing? Then the second type of person in your learning circle should be someone like the believer. The believer is someone who holds a mirror up to you. And they see your potential when you start doubting yourself. And they say things like, you've got this when you're wobbling. Someone you can call when you've been offered a stretch project or you need someone to help you think through how to approach it with confidence and helping you boost your self-esteem. Someone who just has your back. Then you've got the bridge. The bridge is someone who has a wide network and they can connect you with different people, different opportunities or information that you probably wouldn't find on your own. They probably know someone who knows someone who knows someone. They can open doors. They can introduce some really interesting people. Now, when you're building these relationships, you have to be intentional about it. They don't just magically appear. And you have to be quite specific in your asks. The vague kind of, oh, let's just stay in touch and let's just catch up. It doesn't work with this learning circle. And you have to give as much as you take. So share resources, make introductions, offer your expertise, make sure that you're creating regular touch points and having those monthly coffees, quarterly check-ins, whatever works for you and your learning circle. And expand on this as strategically as you can. If everyone in your circle thinks how you think, then you're just in an echo chamber. But when you're intentional about your circle, you can actually create something really powerful. And it's a group of people who raise the standard of your thinking and can accelerate how you grow. Because confidence grows faster in the right company. And your learning circle will help you do that. Okay, I'm going to be real for a minute here because you may be listening to this saying, I just don't have the time, Advita. But we all have those seasons when everything feels on fire. You may be in the middle of a reorganization. You may be in the middle of a massive crisis. You've got relentless quarter end and time on learning can feel like a luxury. I honestly get it. I've been there and I know many others have as well. But it's often in those high pressure moments when you feel the least able to learn is when you learn the most and when you need it the most as well. Because it's those small shifts in that knowledge building or perspectives during that kind of chaos and vibrancy that can have the biggest impact on decisions and our confidence. So what do you do when you have no time? Here's some practical tips. So the first practical tip is micro learning. So this could be anything from 10 minutes on your commute listening to a podcast of choice. It could be an article that you read over lunchtime. It could be something like a 5-minute debrief with a colleague after you've had an uncomfortable or a tough meeting, just to kind of relay what's happened. The second is about learning from the chaos of the vibrancy itself. So after a brutal week, ask yourself, what did this teach me about leading under pressure? What did this teach me about myself? What actually happened better than I expected it to happen? Those moments can really help. Third is about leaning on your learning circle. So a quick 10-minute call to your questioner, your believer, your bridge, when you're in the thick of it can really help give you perspective, especially when you're so close to the stuff that's going on around you. And then think about the just-in-time learning. You don't need to know everything about everything, right? So if you're working on a big project, you may just want to understand the impact that project may have on your department or your team. Just the parts to help you lead effectively in that moment. We sometimes fall into that trap about wanting to know everything, and you don't need to. Then it's about anchoring your time and protecting that time. So even if it's only 10 minutes a day to reflect or 10 minutes a week can really help you stabilize everything in chaotic, kind of vibrant times. So treat it like a critical meeting, because when the heat is on, leaders who keep learning don't just survive, they thrive. And I know you would have heard that a few times, but they do. They make better decisions. They spot opportunities others might miss. And most importantly, they come out of that vibrant, chaotic season much stronger. I hope you enjoyed this episode today. Thank you so much for joining me. If something related with you today or resonated with you, then please do let me know. You can share it on social media. You can follow us on TikTok and on Instagram, decoding_confidence, or you can email me directly if you prefer. It's advita@decodingconfidence.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and places like that as well. Next time, we are going to be sharing a topic which a lot of leaders believe they have, but don't often practice it in the way it should be, and that is integrity. Everything that I've shared in today's episode is in the show notes, and if you've got any questions about integrity and you want me to cover a key area around integrity, then please drop me a note and I'll make sure it's covered off in that episode. Thank you so much once again. Remember, keep decoding confidence in the way that works for you. See you next time. I hope this episode gave you something to reflect on and one small habit you can start practicing. If you'd like to keep building your confidence in practical, everyday way, you can download my free 30-day confidence challenge. It's designed to help you build simple, micro habits each day, so confidence grows steadily over time. You'll find the link in the show notes below. Make sure you're following this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And please do share with others if you think it will help them feel more confident and be more confident. Remember, confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you can practice one day at a time.